Do you have IRAs or 401ks? And are you nearing the age of required minimum distributions, also known as RMDs? Do you know how to calculate them and how they will impact your taxes? Can you avoid them? In this episode, we're going to explain what you need to know. We'll also talk about the risks of not preparing in advance, and we'll share strategies that could help you reduce or avoid RMDs or possibly use them in more impactful ways.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Hey everybody, welcome into this edition of the podcast. It's Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself, here to talk about understanding RMDs, kind of a guide for retirees to, and the soon-to-be retired, I suppose, is going to be the topic of conversation this week here with Liz. And as always, if you've got some questions, need some help, please, before you take any action, always check with a qualified professional like Liz, and you can find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. She is the founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors, so check her out online, reach out to her, especially around, the various topics we talk about. There's always something where you really should be talking with a professional anyway, but certainly when it comes to something like RMDs, there's a lot of moving parts and information to know. And so we're going to go through a great conversation here with Liz today on this. And again, you can find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, what's going on? How are you?
I am wonderful. I just love that it's the holiday season already.
I know you and I were just chit-chatting about, we're taping this after Thanksgiving, so we were just talking about the pleasantries of Thanksgiving and all that good stuff. So hopefully all the listeners out there had a good holiday as well. And, the year's winding down, and I know that it's pretty tight for some of the things we're probably going to talk about when it comes to R&Ds, because there are some deadlines here I want to get into. So we'll just dive right in and get going and chat on a few things. But, if you're 55, Liz, and pondering retirement, again, you're a little ways away from these, but you're probably, hopefully, starting to think about some of this stuff. And so I want to talk through some of the main pieces. So let's kick it off with, why aren't a lot of people clear on what an RMD is, why it exists? Just kind of give us the basic setup on this item to begin with.
I think that this is one of those confusing areas, at least when I have people that come into some of the seminars that I've done in the past. There's a bit of confusion over how you even calculate them. To go back to why do we have them? The tax code says we have to pay tax on all income that we receive when we receive it, unless there's an exception. Mm-hmm. And one of the exceptions is we can take some of our current earnings and move that into a 401k or an IRA, one of those tax deferred accounts, so that we don't pay tax on it in the year that we earned it. And we push that forward to the future, to retirement, and we're going to pay tax on that in the future,
right,
in
which
retirement.
Which is what most of us are taught to do, right? So we're kicking that tax can down the road, pumping the money into the 401k from the job we're working at.
Exactly. And, the idea is that we're saving taxes currently.
Right.
And we're going to pay taxes in retirement. And initially, there was a lot of thought that those taxes in retirement would be lower. Now, of course, a lot of the laws that were put in place to allow people to do this were put in place at a period of time where our marginal tax bracket, that top bracket, was 70% or above. So it was a lot higher tax structure at that time than we do have now. But
for sure.
At some point in time, you have to start taking money out. They're not going to let you defer that forever.
Right.
And
which
so the
would
IRS,
be nice, right? I mean, we kind of trick ourselves into going, hey, this is a problem for humans are great at that, right? This is a problem for a later day. So boop, let's kick it down the road, right? And unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, you're going to get older and later shows up, right?
Right. And the IRS has chosen a starting date. There would be people that would never need to take any of their money out of their IRAs because they have other retirement income and they could just let it continue to defer and continue to defer. And so the IRS has selected what they call your required beginning date.
Yeah.
And so if you are turning 73 this year, you have to start taking required minimum distributions this year. You can actually take that by April of next year, but then you would have to take 2 next year.
Yeah, so
because you would still.
Let's dive into that real fast, Liz, so we can kind of clarify this for people, right? Because here's where some of the confusion comes in. So people have probably heard that the time is moved, right? It was 70 and a half forever. Right. And then which was always goofy, the half thing anyway. And then they made it 72 with the first Secure Act. Now they've moved it again to 73 with the passing of the second Secure Act. And eventually it's going to be 75, supposedly, for folks born after a certain date. So like I'm 52, it'll be 75 for me. But let's clarify this. Yes. So it's 73 now, correct? And if you're turning that this year, in this calendar year, technically you need to get this done by December 31st. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. This year is your first year of taking a required minimum distribution. And in the first year, they allow you to take it by the time that you're doing your tax return. So they allow you to take it next January, February, March.
Right.
The problem with that is that you then still have to take next year's RMD. So you would have to double up.
Which could be hefty, right? That could kick you into kick you into a tax bracket change too if you're not careful, correct?
Yeah, so everybody would have to look at their own situation. If there's a reason that this year is a higher income year and you want to scoot it into next year, you have that option. But after your first year, you always have to take it by the end of the year.
Yeah. And if you're already like doing this, right? If you've been taking RMDs, you're pretty much set, right? Because you're doing this annually anyway. So you're already kind of in the groove. So this conversation is really for people who haven't probably started those yet. Is that fair?
Yes. And anybody that is, like you said, born 1959 or earlier, they're going to have a starting date of age 73 if they weren't already required to take it at 70 and a half or 72. Anyone that's born 1960 or later will have that starting date of age 75. And that's, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we talk about some strategies, but that gives you a few more years of doing some of that advanced planning that we talked about.
Yeah. And, and I think the question became, Liz, like, well, why did they back it up, right? If they want the tax money, they've been waiting for 30 years or whatever it is, right? Why did they back it up? And I mean, it's just, it allows it to grow. It's a bigger pot, so there's more money you're going to have to pay in. And so let's talk real quickly. So like you're doing the first one. I know that there's not a hard and fast percentage number because it's based on a more interesting, complicated equation for the amount. But it tends to round out for that first one, about 3.5%, something like that. And 3.5%, maybe 4%. So if you're sitting on $1 million, and you're talking about $35,000 you got to pull out, right? So people start to say, well, hey, what if I don't need that? I'm doing well. I've got a good plan in place. You mentioned that earlier. I don't want to have to take this 30 or 35 grand out. What can I do to avoid it? And technically you can't avoid it, right?
You can't. And that's why they call it required minimum distributions, because they are required at that age. So if you have any money left in a 401k or an IRA that you haven't paid tax on, because you were able to defer that to a future point in time, you are required to start taking that amount out. And on $1 million, if somebody is turning 73 this year, the exact dollar amount would be $37,735.
There you go.
You can look at a chart for that on my website under the good stuff, under those checklists. My key financial data has the chart with the factor that you use. So you basically take your year-end value from last December 31, you take the age that you're turning this year, you look up your factor, you divide your year-end value by that factor. And that's a question I get. How do you calculate that?
Sure.
But if you don't want to have to take those required minimum distributions, the way to avoid that is to have nothing left in a 401k or an IRA at that age.
Right. I was going to say, because you started the show by saying, if you want to figure out how to not do it, but yet you just got through saying you have to take them. So how do you do that, right? You've got to move the money out of the account. And that's really been, a lot of people have been hearing the big conversation the last couple of years, Liz, of doing something like a Roth conversion, right?
And so you would have to pull money out. You could take a distribution, put it in a regular brokerage account, or convert that distribution to a Roth IRA where you would then have tax-free growth going forward. but this doesn't avoid the tax on that tax
Exactly.
deferred account. It
Yep.
just settles that bill sooner rather than later.
Ultimately, if you're being philosophical, no, you cannot avoid paying the taxes. You're going to pay the
Right.
taxes. It's whether or not you're trying to avoid the RMD distribution is really, I guess, the
Right.
topic, right, of how you move around that. Because one way or another, you're paying the taxes, whether you pay them sooner and take the money out and move it to someplace else, or you pay it for RMDs. But one way or another, you're paying it.
And by taking it sooner, you're getting to control when you pay the taxes. You're getting to think through how much you're going to pay tax on. Because, like you said earlier, if you leave it in longer, it's growing to a bigger balance.
Sure.
And you have a bigger RMD. So you can take some partial distributions or do some partial Roth conversions, and that can reduce those future RMDs to a lower, more tax manageable amount without creating too much of a tax hit in the current year.
Right.
And that's
right.
part of the planning that really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you got to strategize, right? Because otherwise you could be, to our point a second ago as well, kicking yourself into a higher tax bracket too by, having to take this money,
Right.
and depending on the amount that it is. And of course, if you wait for the first year and you have to do 2 next year, then you really could be doing that. So we kind of covered that. I think we've got that kind of dialed in a little bit. What are some of the risks by not doing it? Now they were very gracious, Liz. They're so wonderful over there at the IRS. They dropped it down from a massive 50% penalty with the change in the tax code, or excuse me, with the change in the Secure Act, and made it 25 now, I think.
It's 25%, but it can be 10% if you get it corrected within 2 years.
Just see
And
how
so
kind.
they're-
So kind of them.
They're likely going to be a lot of people that have the 10%. And there's a 10% penalty on many other things in the tax code. So 10% makes sense to bring it in line with what kind of tax do you pay if you take out money before 59 and a half.
Right.
10% tax penalty.
Yeah.
So that would make it a lot more equal across the code. But if you don't, besides not taking that RMD on time, and that is a big risk, you don't want to have to pay that tax penalty. If you don't plan ahead, then you're going to have that bigger RMD that we were talking about. That could become quite a large number. And even if you're only taking the minimum, that can grow.
Yeah.
So if somebody has a IRA of $1 million and they're age 66, and that's growing at just 6%, and they're not taking anything out until they have to take money out, then by the time they reach age 73, that RMD has already grown to 55,000. We talked about a minute ago that $1 million at age 73 would be 37,000. Well, if they have the $1 million at age 66, then at age 73, it's already 55,000. And if they are only taking the minimum, then at age 83, it's already 92,000.
Yeah.
And at age 93, it's already 127,000. And the things we have going on here are, the factor is you're taking out just the minimum. You've got growth more than that amount of money. Your factor is increasing as you age, and our taxes are going up. And so that can continue to push you up and up until to a higher bracket.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got to do some planning, right, to be efficient with these things. Again, especially if you've got a good plan in place, and maybe you've got maybe you're lucky enough to have a pension and your Social Security and whatever, right? And so, people who find themselves in that position, that wonderful position in some ways of saying, I don't have to need the money. Why do I have to take it? Kind of conversation we talked about a minute ago. You've done a great job. If you're in that position where you don't need to take these RMDs out because you need that money to live on, you've done a great job for with your overall income plan. However, you still got to figure out something efficient to do with this money, and so that you're trying to keep your taxes efficient as possible. So what are some places we can do something? Now, obviously, we talked about lowering the amount in the accounts. That was one way of doing that, certainly, by just doing Roth conversions or moving the money ahead of time and paying the taxes. But what are some other things that you can suggest? Many people talk about, if you're charitable minded, Liz, you could do something like a QCD. And I was going to have you explain that to folks, where that is a way they could satisfy those RMDs, or at least part of the RMDs, depending on how charitable minded you are, by sending it directly to charities, correct?
That's an excellent way to avoid tax on the RMD. If you are charitably inclined, you can even start this at age 70 and a half. But at the point in time that you have to take RMDs, you can have the money sent, your charitable gift that you were going to give anyways. You can have that sent from your IRA directly to the charity. Now, if you pull the money out yourself, you're going to pay tax on it, and then you turn around and give the gift to charity. You can deduct the gift if you're itemizing. If instead of doing that, you send the money directly to charity, you do not report that amount of gift that you were given. You don't report the money that came out of your IRA on your tax return as taxable income. The charity doesn't pay any tax on that income either. And so you've avoided any tax on those dollars and done the charitable giving that you were going to do anyways. Now, you can also continue, you can increase the charitable giving. You can use that to give your full required minimum distribution out of your IRA. You can even give up to $100,000 a year per person. So if you're a married couple, you could give $200,000 a year between the two of you as charitable gifts, pulling that from your IRA. This is one way to potentially help pull down some of those values without tax. Going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, it's important to think through ways that you can pull those IRA balances down or level out your required minimum distribution over time. Because if you don't, you'll be pushed into a higher tax bracket as those required minimum distributions grow. And that can also push you into a higher Medicare IRMA bracket, which means then your cost of your Medicare will go up. And the surviving spouse is going to have a bigger tax to pay because they'll be impacted by what we call the widow's tax, where they have the same amount of income or they have the same required minimum distributions that are needing to come out of IRAs, but they're having to pay tax on that as a single filer rather than married filing jointly. And they end up paying a lot more in income tax as a result of that.
Yeah, so I mean, you can certainly see there's all these little pieces that can, be altered by not having a good plan. So with that kind of, all that kind of stuff said there, Liz, it sounds like this is obviously a place that you focus on at your practice, quite heavily, and people should be taking a look at this because it can really have a trickle effect on all sorts of other areas.
I had a couple that had watched one of my taxes and retirement webinars, and they reached out to me to help them create a tax plan. They had significant retirement savings, a 401k. They had money in a traditional IRA. They had money in non-deductible IRAs that they had contributed to over the years when they didn't meet the rules for it to be a deductible IRA. And they had a small amount in Roth IRAs that they had started accumulating in more recent years. And they really wanted a plan to help them minimize those taxes over their lifetime. Because what's important when you're thinking about your taxes is not just what you're paying this year, but what is your lifetime tax? What are you going to pay over all of the years? And so I helped them do some very important planning. We separated the traditional IRA from the non-deductible IRA. We rolled that back into a 401k so that we could convert that non-deductible IRA to a Roth with minimal tax cost. We looked at preserving some of the traditional IRA for lifetime charitable giving so that we could use those QCDs so that nobody would pay tax on those dollars. We converted the rest to a Roth IRA. Well, we've got the plan set up because we haven't gone through the full planning period yet, but we've got a plan for how much to convert each year over a 5-year period. We're looking at converting the wife's non-deductible IRA to a Roth last because that's going to be the least costly after that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has expired. And then we looked at the timing and the amounts for doing these different things, how we could coordinate all of the moving parts to save them the most in taxes. And when I project this out to their age 90, if they didn't do any of these things, if they just took the RMDs as they came, they would pay $1.4 million in taxes over their lifetime. By doing these things, we were able to reduce that to $950,000.
Yeah.
So we saved about 40% in lifetime taxes just by taking advantage of the things that are allowed in the tax code.
Yeah.
To help them reduce their taxes. If they live to age 100, then they do expect to live a long time. They have family that lives a long time.
Mhm.
It actually then ramps up to an even bigger difference, because if they didn't do anything, those RMDs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Sure, yeah. I mean, half a
And
million
so
dollars.
the
I mean, I don't know
yeah,
about you, but $500,000 sounds like a pretty darn good savings.
it's a huge
What
savings.
can you do with that in
Uh,
retirement? Exactly.
yeah, and if they live another 10 years, it goes from 2.4 million if they do nothing to 1.15 million with the changes. So it's then they're saving 50%,
Yeah, yeah.
because that next 10 years makes a difference. But think about beyond that, their heirs.
That's what I was going to say.
They're
Yeah,
yeah.
this is money, especially when you're talking about those ages you're projecting. Like that's money you're probably more than likely leaving to your family at that point.
Right. And we've gotten a big chunk of that into the Roth IRA world. So there will be additional tax savings that the heirs receive and achieve that aren't factored into the numbers that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So that type of planning, being able to look at each of the different moving parts and decide and determine what's the best way to put all this together so that you can save the very most in taxes and still accomplish all of the spending that they want to do, all of the travel they want to do, all of the gifting they want to do to family and to charity, still be able to accomplish all of those things and have a very secure retirement. That is a really good planning. And that's the kind of planning that you want to do with your IRAs and 401ks to put you in the very best position for retirement on your best path.
I was going to say, that's how you get on your best path, right?
Yeah.
So, when it comes to these RMDs, right? So you can certainly see there's a lot of little moving parts there. So we often hear a lot of these, kind of things. We have a basic idea of an understanding of it, but it gets a little tricky in the weeds. So you want to make sure that you're talking to a qualified professional like Liz. So again, some of the key things to take away. Remember that if you're turning 73 this year, you do need to have one. You need to take this out by December 31st. If not, you can roll the very first one only until next year, but then you'll have to take two next year, and that could create some tax issues. So just make sure that you're reaching out and talking to a qualified professional like Liz on this subject and getting prepared. If you're not turning 73 till next year, you got some time, but you can certainly start strategizing and working with someone to get yourself onto your best path. So reach out to Liz, give her a jingle, give her a shout, find her online there at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com, and don't forget to check out some of that stuff on the good section she's got on her website there. She's got the good things there. You can check out the I guess that's the table, right? You're talking about how they break down the amount of the RMDs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that key financial data, not only has that table, it has the tax brackets, it has the IRMA brackets. So it has all of the different factors that we talked about in today's show that people could look at for their own situation.
Yep, there you go. So that's the good stuff on her website, bestpathadvisors.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Google, Spotify, all that good jazz. You can find us there as well. And we'll get out of here because we went a little bit long this week, but thank you so much for the time. It was certainly a good conversation with a lot of information to deal with a very important topic when it comes to being as efficient as possible in retirement. So make sure you subscribe to us. Check out new episodes when they come out right here on Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry, founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors. Liz, thanks for hanging out. Have a great week.
Thank you. It's always good.
We'll see you next time.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whittaberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.